Okay, so another awesome control that we have in our Windows Forms toolbox in the NetAdvantage Windows Forms tools is the WinToolTipManager. Now you may think, well, tooltips, you might have an opinion on tooltips, but I want you to know that adding tooltips, very rich tooltips, throughout your application can provide a great user experience, because think about it, if you provide them with a very well done and intuitive and informative tooltip, you don't really have to expend a lot of resources on training, support, and other areas where your end users will go if they don't know how to use your app. So providing them with guidance throughout the application's course will make it much easier for them, much easier for you, gaining acceptance, reducing cost of support, and things of that nature. So that's always a good practice to have informative tooltips throughout your app in cases where it makes sense. And you could also even configure it where your end user can probably select a setting in your app, and you could show tooltips if they're a beginner, or as they become more veteran users you could reduce the amount of tooltips that you show. But that's just part of designing your app. The scope of this video is to show you how easy it is to use the WinToolTipManager and how you can make some really rich and awesome formatted tooltips throughout your app. So to get started, I'm going to use this form that I've whipped up in a previous video with a bunch of controls all being managed and so forth. And what I want to do is add tooltips to these various controls. So what I'll do is go to the WinForms toolbox with the NetAdvantage tools, and the control name in the toolbox is called Ultra Tooltip Manager. So let's go and find that one. Here it is, Ultra Tooltip Manager. Double click it and it's a component that gets tossed into your component area. And now what this does, it extends all controls and it gives it a property extension. So let's make this a little bigger so we can see it. And now here it is. Here's the property extension, the Ultra Tooltip on Ultra Tooltip Manager 1. Then we could do a lot of stuff like appearance-based objects. We could set what the tooltip will look like, and the basic Infragistics appearance objects. You could enable or disable these. You could associate a tag at runtime if you want, like you want to stuff a business object in there if you needed to. Then you could set a tooltip image, whether it's custom, info, warning, some preset ones, and then a custom one if you want. Then there's tooltip text, but let me show you something that I like to do. You want to create a really rich tooltip. This is what I go for. First, set the tooltip text style to formatted. Then you could set the tooltip text formatted to a formatted text string. And don't worry about not knowing what the markup language is. Just pop this up like this by clicking the button and then start typing stuff in. And I'm just going to randomly format stuff in here, like let's say if I want to make this bold and increase the size a little bit. And if you've seen the other videos with the ultra formatted link label and the ultra formatted text editor, it's the same type of markup language and the same type of setup, but that rendered text gets tossed into a really cool looking tooltip. So let's just navigate to an image. This is my generic silly image for the day that I'm in the mood for. And we'll click on this here. Okay. And let's do this. Let's do another one here. Let's just do something slightly different for this gauge here. So go back to this, and the tooltip text style is formatted. And when I go to set the actual formatted text, I'll just type in more text. And then we just toss another image in there just to be silly. Have another image that I could throw in there. So let's run the application and see how this performs, and let's see what kind of end user experience we get. Of course, you'll have more meaningful text and images than what I did. So if I hover over here, I get this really awesome tooltip. Now again, that was just me being silly, but imagine the type of feedback you can give your end users with rich tooltips. You can give them like a really detailed guidance on how to interact with a certain part of your application by giving them these tooltips. And there's all sorts of properties such as duration and size and various other things that you can do this as well. So Infragistics uses similar techniques like this with a lot of applications we have here internally, and as well as we do something similar to this with Quince. But again, it was very easy for me to set this up. I just threw the component onto the form and then went around and touched each control that should get a tooltip, so that way you have custom tooltips for each one. So now that you know how easy this was to hook up and how simple it was for me to configure it, now you should definitely go through your app and think of those areas. Maybe you want to search your desktop support or whatever, your support department, if you capture that data, and look at the areas where people ask the most questions and see if you can somehow integrate this type of functionality into your app to address those questions, and see if the data changes over a little bit of time. And and that's just one idea. You could come up with hundreds of other ideas and use cases for this. So enjoy it, and hope to see you use this in your apps.
Infragistics. On the web at infragistics.com.